In Chichewa, right?
Yes.
All right. Let us pray. Tikuthokozani Ambuye pamene tikuyamba meeting yathu. Ndi chifuniro chanu kuti munalenga anthu a mtundu ofanana, koma dziko lapansi linasankha kugawanikana. Tikupempha kuti mukhale nawo abale athu kuna kulikonse pa dziko lapansi kumene akulandira mavuto osiyanasiyana, kuti nawonso athe kupangidwa recognize ngati anthu. M'dzina la Yesu Khristu khala nafeni pamene tikumenya ufulu wa munthu wina aliyense wakuda pa dziko lonse lapansi, mpaka na dziko lonse litazindikira kuti tonse ndi anthu ofanana. Tidazunzika mu ukapolo, Ambuye munatipulumutsa, tidzonse mudzatisiya, mudzakhala nafe muzonse. M'dzina la Yesu Khristu we have prayed. Amen.
Yes, amen. Thank you very much. Yes, then you can continue with your reports. You'll have 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Yeah. Thank
you. Greetings, everyone. It's Brother Amazing Grace from Malawi once again. This Saturday we are presenting on Afrophobia, and I would just have to highlight a few activities related to such happening in Malawi. The history of Malawi already presented in my previous presentation, but I'll just make a little introduction on Afrophobia or Afrocentism or anti-African sentiments, which is a perceived or an actual prejudice, hostility, discrimination, or racism towards people and cultures of Africa and the African diaspora. Prejudice against Africans and people of Africa, this African descent, has a long history dating back to the Atlantic slave trade. We made the same presentation about the transatlantic slave trade, where so many of our ancestors, the Black people, were murdered and killed mercilessly by the whites. For Malawi, a little bit of the history. Malawians depend on business and small at a small scale, and most of these piecework, we call them piecework gang, that they're employed in non-Malawians, non-Africans, most especially Asians and Europeans. And there are so many Afrophobic activities happening to Malawians here, ranging from poor salaries, working under empty stomach because they don't even be allowed to go to eat something during the lunch hours. There is beating in this working areas, companies. There's unconditional discharge and the sexual exploitation, longer periods of work, and less pay. There are even killing people, Malawians of Black race are being killed in these Asian, Chinese, and European-owned companies. These are some of the highlighted Afrophobic activities happening in Malawi, and there is a need for intervention, and the Black, we are here to save these people. The I Love Black People is here to take care of these people. A little bit of Malawi about the founder, Hastings Kamuzubanda, 1964. Our colonials, the British, we are nicknamed the warm heart of Africa. Our religion is Christianity and followed by Muslims, Islam. And our official language is Chichewa and English. Malawi is dominated by Chewa tribe, and the Chewa culture is largely located in the central region. Our staple food is in Sima. We are bordered to Tanzania, Zambia, and Mozambique. Our currency is kwacha. As I've already said, Malawi's economy depends on agriculture and the donor aid. Currently, we are celebrating the Eid Mubarak, with our friends, the Muslim community. And on 24th, due to this, on 24th April, we are going to be on public holiday here in Malawi. And the other thing that I have to say, and the last one is Malawi is currently recovering from Cyclone Freddy, as in my earlier report, I said the previous reports, which happened in 15 March 2023. We lost over 499 lives and the displacement of 508, 5,008. Over 5,000 people were displaced and a lot of crops were damaged. And so far, Yvonne, that is what I presented. I prepared to present this afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, our brother Amazing Grace from Malawi. Thank you for a wonderful report. Is up next, we are going to have our brother, Shahid Kasim. Yes, Shahid Kasim, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Yes, Shahid Kasim, can you hear us? Okay. They might have some network issues. We're going to continue with our brother Edwin Chamba from Tanzania. Edwin Chamba, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello?
Thank you so much.
Yes, you have 4 minutes to present your report.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. As you said, my name is Edwin Chamba, an ambassador from Tanzania. I would like to thank everyone in this day of blessing of Eid al-Fitr. Thank you, everyone. And I say Eid Mubarak to everyone. My special thanks to our co-founders as usual, my brothers and sisters around the African diaspora. Thank you. Today, I'm going to speak about Afrophobia. As my brother Amazing Grace said, Afrophobia is an Afro-scepticism or anti-African sentiment, and it is perceived or actually can be prejudice, hostility, discrimination, or racism towards people and culture of Africa and African diaspora. Prejudice against Africans and the people of African descent, as my brother Amazing Grace said, started as long as way back since the Atlantic slave trade. But in Tanzania, the impact of Afrophobia and their related features and characteristics are very rare or no at all in some places due to the unit among the Tanzanians in the country, as well as the love of the Tanzanians that have to themselves and to other people of Africa and the rest of the world. As you know, Tanzania is one of the African countries that contributed to the freedom of other African countries, especially those from sub-Saharan Africa. And so that shows how Tanzanians have the love from their heart. And so there is a very minimum Afrophobia in Tanzanian societies or communities. In Tanzania, we also are there with some human rights regulations. We have some latest research campaigns and education materials from Amnesty International. Also, our democratic rule of law that we have now under our President Samia Suluhu Hassan that shape our police and other government forces to treat all people equally with respect and dignity. We have some movements within the country, such as we have an organization called Smaujata, which deals with protecting people from any kind of humiliation in societies in collaboration with the Ministry of Gender, Child, and Elders to make sure that everyone in the country, in Tanzania, is safe from any kind of humiliation, any kind of Afrophobia, and such kind of other humiliations. And for today, I may say thank you. Thank you so much for listening. That is all I have for today. Thank you for the opportunity from I Love Black People today, as well as all people who gave me their ears for listening. Thank you so much. I am because we are. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Edwin Chamba. I am because we are. Thank you for a wonderful report. Up next, we are going to have our brother Shahid Kasim from Ghana. Shahid Kasim, can you hear us?
Yeah, thank you, madam, for the
Yes,
opportunity.
you have
As you said,
your report.
okay. My name is Kasim Shahid, ambassador from Ghana. Let me first of all thank the organizers of this program and also wish my fellow Africans and Muslims a happy Eid. Today, as you're all aware, our topic is about Afrophobia. And Afrophobia, or African sentiment, is a perceived fear and hatred of the culture and people of Africa. According to reports, shops belonging to Nigerians were recently locked up by Ghanaian traders at the popular Opera Square electronic market in the business district of Accra, the capital of Ghana. The angry traders reportedly attacked Nigerian traders and sealed off their shops. But some Nigerian traders were said to have resisted in self-defense, which led to a brawl before the police took control of the situation. Afrophobia, orchestrated by political sacrifices, is often driven by political economic factors to score political gains. This gives rise to violent reciprocal political antagonism, which is a threat to peace, democratic consolidation, and the socio-economic development of the country. Kwame Nkrumah said, all people of African descent, whether they live in North or South America, Caribbeans, or in any part of the world, are Africans and belong to the African nation. I want to take this opportunity to also say something little about current affairs in Ghana. As you're all aware, the global economy was hit by the pandemic, that is the COVID-19, and then the recent Ukraine-Russia war. This has led to many economies struggling. But today, as I'm here, I want to take this opportunity to express a little delight to my fellow Africans that Ghana, we are gradually recovering from the messes. Our economy is gradually gaining its stability. And our current president is His Excellency Nana Adjei Akufo-Addo. Based on what Kwame Nkrumah said some years back, I therefore conclude by adding that there is a need for Africans and Afro-descendants to reclaim ownership over the narration of their own history and revive their cultural identities to strengthen the nation to achieve African unity. Thank you very much for the opportunity once again. I am because we are. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I am because we are. Thank you, Sahim Kashid, for the report. Up next, we are going to have our brother Momodu Ba from South Sudan. Yes, Momodu, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Okay. We are going to continue with Robert Ruari from South Sudan. Yes, Robert, can you hear us? Robert, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, yes, we can hear you.
No, okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Yes, you have 4 minutes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
From South Sudan. I'm going to talk about few things. Last 2 days, last weeks, I was talking about the culture about South Sudan. Today, I'm going to talk on two.
Hello, Robert, can you hear us? You are on mute. You can unmute yourself. Hello, Robert, can you hear us? Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you one again for giving me this opportunity. I'm Robert Roy from South Sudan, which is a Republic of South Sudan. It is located in the Eastern Central Africa. And it is the recently youngest nation in Africa. Last week, I talked about the culture of South Sudan. Today, I'm going to talk about the population that South Sudan is attaining. South Sudan is one of the youngest nations in the world. It is the north, Kenya to the southeast, Uganda to the south, Democratic Republic of Congo to the west, southwest, and Central African Republic to the west. The population currently, United Nations data, South Sudan is composed mostly to the Nilotic people. It is a demograph among the youngest nation in the world, ethnic by South Sudanese. It is the richest diversity. There is a 64 tribes or ethnic groups are native of the nation of the nation. Most of the ethnic groups sharing the common cultures, very closely linked culture tribes with integrity, along with the forming data, largest unit. So South Sudan is composed of 3 regions. We have Afuna region, Equatorial region, and Barat Gaza region. All these 3 regions, they are containing a lot of minerals. When you see the Afuna preserving oil, it's containing. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Hello, Robert, can you hear us? Oh, I think he's having some issues with network. We are going to continue with our brother, Momodu Ba. Yes, Momodu, can you unmute yourself? Yes, you have 2 minutes
Hello.
to present your report. Yes, Momodu, we can hear you.
Good. Okay, I'm Muba from the Gambia. I would like to discuss. Last Saturday, I discussed about Gambia, the population of the Gambia, and I also discussed about our culture and tradition, etc. So talk about in our country here, Gambia, especially when we talk about Gambia as a nation, we believe we are looking at the country, its culture. Discrimination is limited within Afro family. When you talk about Afro family, talk about discrimination within tribes or within other races. But look at the Gambia here, discrimination happens within the country, within the black people who are living in this country. But sometimes, due to looking at the Chinese and other Europeans who are currently
Yes, Momodu, can you hear us? Okay, I think he has some network issues. We are going to have our last speaker, Wilson Zowa. Wilson Zowa, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Wilson, so, about the issue of Africa. Are we talking about
Sorry, Wilson, we can't hear you.
Okay.
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay, let me do this.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. In Tanzania, we
have sorry, Wilson, we can't hear you. Yes, our brother Wilson has some issues with the network. We are going to continue with the Pan-African healthcare class with Nana Akua. Yes, if you want to receive a shout out from her, you know what to do, like turn on your video. Yes, welcome, Nana.
You know what to do. You know what to do. Good day, everyone. Hey, Yvonne. Hey, Julius. I'm cheating. I'm giving the English name because I'm not sure of the surname. I'm cheating. I can say Suzuki, right? I should be able to say your name, Julius. My apologies. Philip, I'm cheating today. David, Jerome, you all know I've been traveling to Ghana for 23 years and I don't speak a language. I'm often chastised about that, right? So there's Tree, there's Fancy, there's Ga. I've traveled all over. I just can't pick up any language other outside of a greeting, right? A yes or a no or a thank you. It's just not my thing. I'll keep working on it. But Jerome and I think I hit everybody. It was more cameras on, now they're off. What's going on? But okay, so greetings everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I want to do something a little different. I received an email and I am going to respond to that personally or directly, but it prompted me to want to go a little off script and to share, I'll call it some information on how I would handle these situations were I in the unfortunate situations to have to address some of the conditions that a lot of our people face. So whether it's cancer or whether it's HIV or diabetes or hypertension or cardiovascular disease, some of these sort of very common chronic conditions that we have, I'd like to kind of give, I'll tell a story of if I had these conditions, right? And the first thing I want to say about that is in line with what chapter we're on. This would be sort of our second part about self-care in terms of handling our emotional stress, our spiritual, psychological stress, handling how we feel, right? And so the first thing I think I'd like to suggest in regards to handling any kind of chronic condition is to always be mindful of how you feel, whether you're experiencing the condition or whether you're the caregiver of someone with such condition. You have to always address your own mental status, how you feel, if you're stressed, if you're depressed, if you're overwhelmed, if you feel defeated, whatever the case may be. What we were going to talk about in more detail was emotional balancing with flower essences. And I can't state this enough, the importance of handling our emotional well-being. So this ties directly into handling or addressing any kind of physical ailment. So if you are experiencing a physical illness, or if your child or a family member or someone else is experiencing an illness, and even if you're not the direct caregiver, but you are, it's a loved one and they are someone you care about, you have to first address balancing your emotions. So if you are feeling overwhelmed, like it's just a lot to handle, you have a hard time handling that your loved one was diagnosed with cancer, or that your loved one is going through treatments of cancer, radiation, chemo, that sort of thing. You may need to do some flower remedies such as elm or hornbeam, right? And these are in the packet, the third week package, right? Where it lists those 38 flower essences. If you've gotten packets from me before, it's in that packet. If you don't and you're not in the WhatsApp group, you can email me, I'll send it to you for spelling and for further explanation of these things. If you are just feeling sad and you feel like you're in despair, gorse is a good remedy for you. It helps with people who are deeply depressed or saddened by certain conditions and that sort of thing. If it's hard adjusting to, say, a new routine, a new schedule, if you yourself are ill and you can't do some of the things that you used to do physically, or if you don't have the bandwidth emotionally, walnut is good for people who are in transition, like having to change their schedule, having to readjust how they can operate in life. If you are the caregiver of someone that's ill, walnut helps with that transitional period. if you just got bad news of someone being ill, Star of Bethlehem. Star of Bethlehem is a flower essence that is good for that. So first, balancing sort of just how you feel so that you're not sort of up and down, or as some people say sometimes, I'm all over the place, or, you know, I just can't handle it. These are really good ways to address that first, right? Really being able to kind of balance out and level out how you're feeling. That, I think, is the first thing to do, whether you are dealing with an illness personally or whether it's a loved one. So now let's talk about cancer. I have had loved ones who have, I'm caring for my mother who's sitting here at the table, so I might be a little distracted every now and again. So now she's kicking me accidentally under the table. But if you are dealing with chemotherapy or radiation, there may be many things that I would do were it me, right? So we know that radiation, you know, pretty much burns the skin, right? So whatever part of the body that may be treated, you might first, just to support that person, use some of the skin healing herbs that we've maybe talked about before. You may use your echinacea, which helps to replenish white blood cells in the skin to help the skin heal. You might use calendula or calendula, which is soothing and healing to the skin. You may use something like golden seal, which also draws out infections and other microorganisms that can cause infection on the skin and help heal the skin. Myrrh is another good one topically. We know that all of these do other things, but in skin creams, or salves or ointments, there are herbs that really can help kind of replenish the skin if it has undergone radiation. And I'm sure there are many others that are just not coming to mind right now. If the person is weakened by chemotherapy treatments, then you may need to rebuild the body, right? If it were me, I would do heavy on the green foods, such as spirulina, wheatgrass, chlorella. And these are easily taken when people are undergoing treatments, right? And don't want to eat a lot, or, chew a lot, take in a lot, having the body do a lot of digesting. These are powders that are easily added to smoothies or mixed into some sort of nut milk, almond, oat, hemp, these types of plant-based milks, or drinking in, well, not these that I just mentioned, not in tea form, but you'd add to either some foods, some soups, some cereals, or make into a smoothie. There are many herbs that are really considered like adaptogen herbs that are healing and help with recovery. These would be your things like ginseng or golden seal, sarsaparilla. You would do high mineral herbs like nettle, which is full of calcium and iron and other minerals, dandelion, catnip, red raspberry. So there are a lot of like replenishing herbs that kind of just help rebuild the body, help rebuild your system and strengthen your constitution. The best combination of herbs that I have come across that I've personally used is something called Essiac. So it's a 4-herb formula that a lot of people have used for cancer, for HIV, for diabetes, or just a whole body cleanser. And it's 4 herbs: sheep sorrel, burdock root, slippery elm, and turkey rhubarb, right? And I know that you're going to want, like, you're not going to just say that one and we not know exactly how they are spelled. So I will type those in, right? But again, if you send me, an email request, I'll get you the information. But this is a really healing herbal formula that's good. Many people have used it to counteract the effects of chemotherapy. Some people have chosen to use it in place of some of the Western or allopathic treatments for cancer, but it really is good at rebuilding the system and really helping regenerate all of our internal organs, things of that nature. So just a little quick tidbit about how to address, or some things you can do to add to, if I were dealing with cancer, those are some of the things that I would do in terms of foods and herbs and that sort of thing. Plenty of water, herbal teas. I would avoid the white and black teas. We know that green tea has been reported as being excellent on fighting cancer and assisting with cancer. So that would be something I would add into my regimen. And so there's so many others, but that's what I would say about that. Let's talk about HIV. We know that throughout the world, there are many people who have come in contact, whether directly or have family members. In South Africa, there is a native herb called African potato. And this, among other things, it's reported as having really good healing effects for HIV patients. This is something you may look into. I have personally used it as an immune booster, as just a way of fighting off colds, flu, infections, boosting my immune system in general. This is something that one might consider. And then again, using restorative foods. This would be under the list of the superfoods that we've talked about in our previous weeks. These are foods that we would add if we are rebuilding our bodies, if we're strengthening our systems, right? We would make sure that we're doing these foods that are highly nutritive, these foods that are going to give a lot of nutrition and really help to build the system as it is fighting off whatever condition, right? Let's talk about diabetes. And I'd like to talk first maybe about juicing. So we know that with diabetes, what we need to do is to follow a low glycemic diet. Foods that are low glycemic foods that will not spike the blood sugar. We know that we have to limit the types of starches that we take into the body. We're going to limit our root vegetables, right, which might be hard for a lot of people. Our root vegetables in a lot of cultures is a staple, but that white yam, that African yam, the white baking russet potatoes or new potatoes that we eat a lot of here, these are things that are really high glycemic foods that will raise your blood sugar. So we really will have to learn how to limit those types of foods. And in some cases, avoid them altogether, at least for a period of time. We know that a sweet potato may be a little better, but still considered a root vegetable. And the same would go for carrots and beets that are considered root vegetables. These are going to be your higher glycemic vegetables. We know that our higher glycemic fruits are going to be things like melons and mangoes, sometimes bananas and grapes. So these are things you're going to do in moderation and really be careful if you are treating diabetes. So if I were addressing those issues, I would do more high fiber fruits like your apples, your pears, your plums, your citrus fruits, your berries, things of that nature. These are going to be better for balancing your blood sugar. I would also add things like cinnamon. I would juice string beans and artichoke hearts and really do really well with eating regularly and not allowing a lot of hours to go by without taking in food or some type of good nutrition. These are things you really have to be mindful of. You have to know what number of hours you can go without food before your blood sugar drops. And anyone usually who's been diagnosed with diabetes knows these types of things and would kind of keep track of such. But sometimes when we're out in the world, we're going through our work schedules, our school schedules, we may lose track. So sometimes we will kind of go a little too long. The best thing to do with that is to always have some fresh fruit with you, or some kind of high protein bar, or maybe some kind of raw nuts or seeds as snacks. Making sure that you stay hydrated throughout the day, if you by chance go without meals for a period of time. But these are things that are very important so that you keep your blood sugar balanced. If I were dealing with hypertension, in addition to, of course, the obvious, you're not going to do excess salts, right? You're going to switch over to just herbal blends for your seasonings, no salt blends. If you're doing salt, maybe a Himalayan sea salt or a Celtic sea salt is going to be a better option, still in moderation. And a lot of the multi-seasonings that you'll buy prepackaged, not only for, say, the diabetic or the person watching their weight, you know, they're full of sugar, but we also know that a lot of those multi-seasoning or multi-spice blends are also very high in salt. So you would be careful of what you're seasoning your foods with. Making your own blends are going to always be a better option. So using actual thyme or oregano or marjoram or tarragon, basil, using actual herbs directly for your seasoning is going to be a better option. We know that we buy these seasoning packs. Oh, let me tell you what us African folk do. We love those little bouillon cubes. Was it Maggi? I know y'all on the continent know. And I see it's a lot of men. I don't know if y'all do the cooking, but if your mothers, your sisters, your wives, or whoever cooking, we use them little cubes to death. They are full of sodium. They are so salty. And we use them here in the States too, right? We just have a number of different brands that people use. And I know we start a lot of our bases and our stews and our sauces with those, but they are so high in sodium. We really have to find a better option. And there are some better options. I don't know how accessible they are on the continent, but here I usually will use something called Better Than Bouillon. It's sort of in a container, not a cube, right? And so it doesn't have that same sodium, and it doesn't have that monosodium glutamate, that MSG, that flavor enhancer that a lot of these seasonings have in it, which is also very bad for our bodies. But we just have to be careful about what we're seasoning our foods with. And we really have to look closely at what's in it. Even if we're just used to it, that's how you make it, that's the recipe. Your mama made it that way, your grandma made it that way. We have to sort of reevaluate and start looking closer at what we are putting in our bodies. I'm a country girl. I grew up, you know, with my grandparents, or my grandfather specifically, having a farm. And, you know, I'm into, you know, eating every part of the pig, which I wouldn't touch now. And I often have these conversations. I don't really argue with people, and I don't really try to convince people anymore. But, you know, you'll have these constant conversations about people who will make arguments for, well, so-and-so ate this, and we've always eaten this way, or my grandmother lived till 95 and she ate every part of the pig. Well, we have to remember that we're in a different day and time. Everything is done differently. Our families are not on farms and raising their own food. And we're reliant, or we're dependent on how these foods are grown, how they're processed, how they're packaged, where food is coming from long distances, the different nitrates and preservatives and things that are added to meats. And all of that these days. The stress level is different because the living is different, right? We are more stressed, which we know has a physiological impact on the body. So everything is different. Where we live, how many people are around us, how many people we come in contact with, what activities the people are involved in. You know, it's just high stress situations that are a lot different than where some of our grandparents or great grandparents came from or how they were raised. So we can't always rely on what our families used to eat or how they used to eat. So we always have to stay up, just as current as we stay on politics, right? As current as we stay on stocks and Bitcoins and different things that happen in the world, we have to also evaluate how we're living, how we interact with others, what's happening with our food supply. And all of these things are very relative to how much quality we have. Into you know, our overall well-being. So what we are eating or fixing our food with, very, very important. So with hypertension, so obviously cutting out salt, but we also need to add certain minerals and certain vitamins into the body. So we know that potassium is important. We know that vitamin K is important. We know that manganese is important. So there are just different supplements you may need to add. There are many good herbs that are good for rebuilding the or balancing the blood pressure. So we know hawthorn berry, juniper berry. These are really good. There's a food supplement. It at one point was going to be considered a vitamin, but CoQ10 or coenzyme Q10 is another good food supplement that can be added, which I would add if I were addressing hypertension. We know that celery, parsley, these natural diuretics, cucumber, these are all excellent for hypertension. They are known for releasing excess fluids and flushing the kidneys from the body. So these are all things that are really important if you're addressing hypertension. Very similar with cardiovascular disease. Can't stress enough about handling stress, right? We have to always, again, know what is causing physical or emotional stress to our bodies, which is causing a problem with how well our blood flows throughout the body, how easily the heart can pump and circulate blood throughout the body, how well oxygen is circulated throughout the body. So we always have to be mindful of those types of things. And we have to make sure that we are doing those heart healthy types of herbs and foods. Another essential oil that I think is also great for the cardiovascular system and for blood pressure is neroli. We spoke, I guess, a couple of weeks ago about essential oils. I'm not sure if I highlighted neroli or not, but neroli has been used for helping to manage blood pressure and cardiovascular health, among other things. So there's so many things. If we were talking about liver conditions, the hepatitis series, we know that there are many good herbs for. Now, fortunately, the liver is very resilient, right? It can rejuvenate itself. It takes a really big hit with a lot of toxins that we put into the body, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, recreational or pharmaceutical. We know that the liver has to filter out all of those things. In addition to anger and resentment, right? So there are emotions that are tied directly to different organs, right? And so because a lot of us have a lot of anger, that directly impacts the liver. So herbs that are really great for the liver: milk thistle, dandelion, yellow dock, turmeric, Oregon grape, and I'm sure others that I'm just not coming to mind at this moment. But they're just always good support herbs and food supplements that help with pretty much every condition. We know that there are many others. There's always going to be additional things that you can do, but I'm trying to just give some quick tips of how you can address these certain conditions, because these are very prevalent. These go on in our daily lives so frequently. And I know questions have popped up. So rebuilding the blood. So red clover is an herb that's really good for the blood. But let me just say, any herb that's good for the liver is also good for the blood, right? So even those ones that I just listed about liver cleansing, these are also herbs that are great for blood in general. And we know that it's all related. So if it addresses the liver, it's cleansing the blood. If it's cleansing the blood, it's healing the skin. So that's a really easy way to kind of think of what herbs would address any of those areas. And I will, Curtis, I will respond to you directly later, but your email just prompted me to kind of discuss some of these things. But we'll talk a little more about that. So what is known that can definitely cause the question, and I just skimmed through it, I think is asking about whether these things can be toxic or cause problems in the body. Now, I did make mention of golden seal earlier. I made a mention of it a couple of times. So we do know that golden seal is one of those herbs that's very, very powerful, very healing, very helpful, but it's not an herb that you would take on an ongoing basis. So usually 7 to 10 days at a time is generally what most people would take golden seal. Just because it can be too much for the liver to kind of filter out or process. Generally though, most herbs are very safe, been used for thousands of years, and really, really have healing effects on the body. I'm just scrolling through your comments. Okay, so I don't think I'm. So yeah, so I think that I kind of hit most of those. I'm going to try and share this screen. And I think I see what I am looking for. So just to go back with our talk. So I'm skimming through here. These are some of the flower remedies that I mentioned, right? So I mentioned this Star of Bethlehem. We know that this is good if you've gotten bad news, if you have a trauma or something has occurred. I talked about walnut. Again, this is good for transitions, for change, things of that nature. So I highly recommend using a lot of these flower remedies to balance your emotions. This next part here is just a different way of handling emotions. And again, if you are having trouble just relieving stress in general, but also if you need help with sleep, and that's probably another one I could have added, and I guess I'm glad we're now on this handout. There are so many people that have trouble sleeping on a very regular, consistent basis. And these are the same people that live a very high stress lifestyle and really need to operate at an optimal level. They are the ones that usually want, oh, how can I have more energy? And they need to do more with less time, right? So I always say that the best way to get more energy is to get more sleep and to really, truly rest, right? And so if you are having trouble resting, here are some really good nervine or sedative herbs that help with achieving good restful sleep, right? So lemon balm or melissa is one. This has a really pleasant taste. Not all of these will, right? But this is really good if you are having trouble getting to sleep and kind of calming down and relaxing. We know that it has other benefits. That's the wonderful thing about these magical herbs that God created, right? Because they will do so many things. They may be predominantly used for a particular condition, but we know it will have other healing benefits as well. So we know that lemon balm also helps soothe any kind of acid stomach or like uneasy stomach or upset stomach. So it's good for bloating, it's good for nausea, heartburn, gas. It's even good for stress-induced headaches, right? Those tension headaches that we sometimes get if we are overworking ourselves. If you are feeling overwhelmed, I mentioned that earlier, and I gave a flower remedy for that. But also, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're having some mild depression, lemon balm is excellent for that. And then, of course, it lists some other things you can add to it just for, you know, some other added benefits. We know that fresh oat or the oat plant is also good for stress. If you're feeling just kind of frazzled and frayed, the oat tops of that plant is good for mental fog. It's good for muscle pain, good for high blood pressure caused by tension. And that is a good, I'm glad this is here too, because we also know that sometimes our hypertension is caused by stress, but then of course, sometimes there are physiological issues, things that are going on in the body that's causing the hypertension. So that'll be important to really analyze with your healthcare provider as to what they believe the cause is. And generally, if it is caused by tension, it's easier, of course, to address because we can use these nervine or sedative herbs to help balance our stress or release our stress so that we can get our blood pressure back into control. Another popular nervine is hops. We know that this is what is used in beer, right? And we know beer is a downer, right? It is a sedative, and it is because it has hops in it. And we know that this is a sedative and relaxant that helps with just calming down, helps you sleep. Some people will use it in combination with mugwort or dreamwort, lavender, some other things to kind of help induce good dreams and restful sleep. It's also good for nursing mothers because it will allow the mammary glands to kind of open up and those the milk let down or to start flowing. So hops is another good option. Chamomile, a lot of people are familiar with chamomile. I find it to be a little mild for my taste, but this of course would be excellent for children or younger people or pregnant women or elderly people. But if you're looking for something stronger, it may not, be your best option, but this has a mild sedative effect. And of course, if you add it to other things as listed here, like adding it with a hops, you will probably get a better result. We know that chamomile is also good for babies. Usually you'll find it in a homeopathic version. So it's good for teething, it's good for colic, just children that are, experiencing whatever kind of upset or discomfort for different reasons in their different stages of growth. And we know that can also be calming to the stomach and the digestive system as well. Usually, if you're taking something like a senna tea to move your bowels, which can be really aggressive, it is a stimulant. A lot of people will add chamomile to that to soothe that whole possibility of griping or stomach cramping if you are using certain like stimulant herbs to move your colon or stimulate your colon. Now, kava kava, this is one of the more, I'll say one of the stronger herbs. So if you are experiencing more than say mild depression, so maybe moderate depression, or if you're experiencing anxiety, most people use kava for anxiety or panic attacks, right? This is going to be a stronger herb that might be more suited for folk who need a little more than say a chamomile. This also relieves pain and stiffness. Any anxious feelings you have, this is going to be sort of your best option. And combining this with, say, a black haw or a cramp bark, this is going to be good for, say, PMS or menstrual cramps, things of that nature, any pains associated with your menstrual cramps. So kava kava is a really good one to have on hand. Skullcap, also one of my favorites. I probably use this one more often than some of these listed here, but same concept. Really good for replenishing the nervous system. If you chronically have trouble sleeping, relaxing, resting, this is one that's really nourishing and kind of rebuilds your nervous system. Wood Bethany, passion flower, valerian is one of my favorites. I have to stop here. I was trying to say I'm not going to go through all of these, but valerian is one of my favorites. Valerian is another one of those that kind of can be used across the board. You can give it to younger people, older people. I used it personally when I was pregnant. I had feet and back pain. So this helped and worked for me really, really well. Usually you're going to want to take this in capsule form because it really smells really bad and probably tastes worse. But excellent, excellent, excellent. So it's good for inducing sleep or rest or calm, but it's also good for pain. If you so choose to take it in, say, tea form or extract form, then you're going to want to mix it with something, right? So you'll mix it with some chamomile or catnip or passion flower or something like that. Just to, because it don't really need help in terms of its effectiveness, but it don't need help for the taste. Motherwort is good. It's a nervine, but it's also good for a lot of women issues, good for hypertension as well. So this is a good one to add if you're having some reproductive issues or some of the challenges that we as women just sometimes deal with. Linden flowers. This one I don't personally use a lot of. I've actually used this one more so in like foot baths and stuff like that, but I think because it can help relieve pressure and tension. I'm a reflexologist, so I've always looked for things that will help treat the hands and feet and create relaxation. But this is really good for relieving the body to dispel headaches, lower blood pressure, that sort of thing. And of course, the obvious, anxiousness, depression, and that sort of stuff as well. So these are some of the things. These are some foods: the dragon fruit, the reishi and maitake mushrooms. These are also good for relaxing the body and relieving stress and things like that. This would be a good option. I was mentioning foods that support certain chronic conditions like cancer and HIV and AIDS, chronic fatigue syndrome, other immune conditions, lupus. Now, lupus is a big one. It's so many things we could talk about, but I just highlighted a few earlier. But this would be in the path of those restorative foods, those superfoods, those foods that would help just sort of build the body. And I mentioned this word earlier, adaptogenic. I mentioned some adaptogen herbs. These are just herbs similar to these mushrooms and the holy basil and the schisandra that they're mentioning here. But there is a whole category of herbs that just sort of help rebuild the body and help it adjust to whatever it is fighting, right? So you need those that help adapt to different situations and prepare the body to fight off things. The last thing I'll go over is the personal care plan. This came to me many years ago, as a mother, as I used to be a practitioner, and when you feel really well, and I would say this is an overwhelming feeling when you're responsible for caring for someone, treating someone, making all boo-boos go away and healing all aches and pains and having answers that not even medical doctors and any other practitioner that you've ever gone to. But when the weight of that or the stress of that, right, is upon you, it can be very overwhelming, right? So I was one day sitting, and I guess Spirit just led me to say, okay, maybe this should just be written out, because when you're under stress, right, which is why I put this under this category, when you are stressed, you're not always thinking what to do. You may know it, you may have the answers, you may have done it with other people, but it may not come very easily to you for yourself, for your loved ones, that sort of thing. So while I'm almost out of time, it just very simply has you write out. And this, of course, will work for chronic conditions, not necessarily something that's out of the blue, an accident or injury that just happened. But if there's a condition that you often have to deal with for yourself or your children or your parents or whomever, write out beforehand all the things that you may need to do, things that help you care for them, things that help you deal with it if it's yourself, who you need to call, at what point you need to call, at what point you need to get further help, or that sort of thing. But have that written out so that it's already there and the stress of the situation doesn't cloud your judgment or your good sense of how to handle the problem. So again, that's in the packet. If you don't have it, I'll gladly send that to you. And I am out of time. So thanks for listening, and I bid you good health and peace.
Yes, thank you so much, Nana Akua, for this wonderful lecture. And I have shared your email in the comment section.
Okay, thank you.
Is anyone who would like to receive the handout, they can reach out to you. Yes, thank you very much. And once again, I am because we are, and have a good weekend. Yes,
Thank you.
Welcome. Up next, you're going to have Dr. Tyreen Wright in the Pan-African.
Yes. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening in some places, some of you. Okay, so welcome to the Pan-African History and Organizing course. I'm going to jump right in because I have two clips that I want to show you. So this week, another visual, so to speak, instead of text. And I'm still going to send you documents related to the readings. So do I have it in front of me? No, I don't have it in front of me. Return to the Source by Amilcar Cabral is part of what I'm going to send you. I would have sent it along, but I have a scanner issue. That being said, the film Cuba and African Odyssey is what you should have watched this week. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of points so that you can bring it all together with what we're doing. One, let's just be clear about Cuba and African Odyssey. It is an entry point to the conversation around African independence. And I use a lot of things as entry points, like, for example, the film, The Journey of Man, A Genetic Odyssey. I'm not promoting Spencer Wells. I'm essentially using it to give you a foundation in the conversation around who is human, what it means to be human, right? So we don't adopt everything that he has to say or whatever the case may be. However, it's an entry point for the conversation around humanity. So likewise, Cuba and African Odyssey is also an entry point to the conversation around African independence and its liberation struggles. And I will give Cuba credit in the sense that it is one of the only nations on the planet that assisted Africa in its liberation struggles that was not also on the African continent. So it's a very important film in terms of understanding that history and that context of that period. So that was what you were going to watch this week, or hopefully already watched. There'll be some materials companion to that, just for your reference. Two things I'm going to deal with regard to Pan-Africanism. One, the story of Patrice Lumumba. And I'm going to go to the comments afterwards, but so I don't have my glasses on, I can't see it. But I'm going to talk about Patrice Lumumba and the Congo in light of African independence and struggle for liberation. I'm also going to talk about Amilcar Cabral, who you probably notably saw in the film as well. And the film started with Patrice Lumumba and the Congo, and initially stated, why would someone like Mandela be in Cuba? Because Cuba lent support, and then it quickly goes on to talk about the Congo at the time. And there was a young clerk who ended up being the prime minister of the Congo. And this is very important because what we are seeing right now in contemporary context is people talking about the Eastern Bloc. And I mentioned this the other day, maybe the last time or the time before that we were together, people talking about Russia and Eastern Europeans. in a positive light, as though they are not involved in white supremacy and culture and racism and things of that nature. But I think as people who are involved and ambassadors who are involved with this organization, you know better, because I Love Black People did, I wouldn't even say a trip, but engaged in giving some refuge and services to African people who were on the border of Ukraine and Poland, because they too, in the Eastern Bloc, are racist and engage in racism, no matter how bad their situation is. Okay, they still have time to be racist against us. It's like Dr. John Henry Clark said, the African has no friends, so we have better be friends to ourselves. So my point of bringing that up is that the tenure of Patrice Lumumba as the prime minister of the Congo Free State at that time, or the Congo, would be eclipsed by the fact that the Cold War would sweep him up into their conflict, and he would end up being a casualty of that, okay? What does this all mean? Patrice Lumumba was attempting to do some of the same things that we are attempting to do, in the sense that was trying to unify the Congo, which is one of the most vast territories on the African continent. It is one of the most significant territories on the continent. The Congo produces some very essential and important resources, some of which are integral to us using technology that we're using right now, okay? But more importantly, they produce cobalt and coltan, okay? These allow the US military and other Western nations to produce equipment and even weapons, okay? The United States doesn't have its own reserve or resource to get cobalt or coltan, really. But the Soviet Union does, okay? The United States to this day gets its cobalt and coltan from none other than the heart of Africa, the Congo, okay? And for this reason, the Congo would be swept up into this Eastern-Western Bloc conflict. So while you may think that African independence is inconsequential to the rest of the world, it is not. There are many reasons why people who are not African, who are not Black, would love to interrupt the unification and unity amongst African people and Black people, okay? That being what I just stated, being one of them. So the young prime minister known as Patrice Lumumba would attempt to unify the Congo. And doing so meant that he would now decide, under an independent and free Congo, who they sell their resources to, so on and so forth. And unify a country made up of multiple ethnicities and cultures, and for the first time, hopefully have the people benefit from what Africa, and particularly the Congo, had to offer. Side note, another thing that is important for you to understand about the Congo is that whoever controls the Congo, okay, and its 9 surrounding countries, controls a bulk of the world's resources, period. To control the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries means to control the world, essentially, okay? Critical resources that the West cannot do without, or will not do without. So you must understand what they're willing to do to stay in control of the Congo and its 9 surrounding countries, all right? And this is just an example of that. So when we talk about the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc, sure, the Eastern Bloc did not have slavery, did not build its society off of slavery, the institution of slavery, but they're no less complicit in when they have the opportunity to engage and participate in racism or domination of some sort of African people in particular, okay? That being said, I do want to just show you a clip because I know there's people on here who may not have accessed it, but we're going to go to it really quickly. And then the other part, I'll just say this and then we'll go to both clips. The other thing that you will see today and that you should have observed in the film is the story or commentary on a small nation in West Africa called Guinea-Bissau, where Amilcar Cabral came from. And this is an unusual case, Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau was one of the few West African nations that actually engaged in armed struggle. And every time I teach this course, I always have ambassadors who ask me about, so what about our ethnic differences? What about our, national identities on the continent? This is sometimes a source of conflict for us. This is what stops us from unifying. And in our course of study, which is in seminar format, I always refer to Amilcar Cabral because he gives us prescription and instruction on how to deal with some of our differences. And let me just be clear. Our differences on the continent in terms of language and ethnicity and nationality in many ways are no different than our differences out in the diaspora, okay? With language, with culture, with nationality, okay? It's just that on the continent of Africa, you have the longest standing relationships, right? Humanity began in Africa. If you have never been removed, you are the oldest friends. You are the oldest foes, right? Many conflicts on the African continent predate European colonialism and imperialism. Once colonialism or imperialism takes hold in Africa, it exploits and exacerbates these conflicts, already existing conflicts between people who are very different, okay? The colonial lines are drawn and it forces people together that are not the same. And it divides people who are the same with colonial borders, right? This is why you can have Senegal and Gambia, right? Gambia is inside of Senegal. However, the Wolof are all throughout Senegambia, Gambia and Senegal. They are the same people, the Wolof, right? In two different countries. The colonial colonists cut them apart, okay? And in that context, they are forced together with other groups of people that they are ethnically different from, linguistically different from, different in terms of spiritual practices, so on and so forth. The world's diversity comes from the African continent. So there is no continent on the face of the earth that is more diverse culturally and ethnically and linguistically than the African continent. Africa and its people are responsible for the world's diversity. Let's be very clear. Let me put it in further context. In the Americas, particularly in the United States, what has happened to us is that we have had a common trauma that has forced us together. We were no less diverse when we arrived than people are on the continent today. We were from different ethnic groups, had different languages, had different cultures. Unfortunately, we had a common atrocity, which was the transatlantic slave trade and then slavery. And through that, we created a common history, and we have a shared history and we have developed a common culture. Unfortunately, it is survival culture, and it doesn't always serve us, right? We want a thriving culture. That being said, we understood our collective interest in struggling against white supremacy, racism, as it manifested in the form of the institution of slavery. Okay. So, and that unification, we can in many ways say that that was very Pan-Africanist for us to unify, because we were ethnically different. Let me just give you an example of how potently ethnically identifiable we were. There's an early insurrection in the United States that people seldom cite. It's called the Stono Rebellion. It was in South Carolina. It predates the Haitian Revolution. It was 1739. The Stono Rebellion or insurrection is a direct result of African people coming from the region known as Angola, being all in one space and place. They were ethnically familiar with each other. And even though they may not have all spoken the same language, they were familiar with each other. As some of you on the African continent know, there's, for example, Gambia and Senegal. Everybody in Gambia and Senegal are not Wolof, but many people in Gambia and Senegal speak Wolof because it is the dominant ethnic group in terms of numbers. Well, yes, people in the Angolan region who were captive and brought to the United States in the context of the transatlantic slave trade were ethnically familiar with each other. And being put on plantations in South Carolina in the United States, familiar with each other from the continent, ethnically familiar with each other, linguistically familiar with each other, that allowed them to organize and stage an insurrection, okay? And they do. They conduct a massacre and they are on a march to what was considered Spanish Florida at the time, a free territory, because it was not part of the 13 colonies, okay? That is the danger for people who seek to enslave, of having too many people from the same region of Africa. That's the danger. So now we can strategize, we can communicate, we can organize, and we can fight against our common oppressor. All right, so that's the danger of it. And that's a perfect example of maybe Pan-Africanism, early Pan-Africanism, right? Coming unity for the purpose of eradicating oppression and exploitation, okay? So back to the continent. What I'm saying is that on the continent of Africa, there was an interest in keeping the people divided under colonial regimes. And this young man named Patrice Lumumba would be one of the people who would attempt to unify a very vast territory and region of Africa known as the Congo, one of the most important parts of the African continent, not the most, but one of the most. I would say the Congo and the 9 surrounding countries are probably the most important territories on the African continent to the world. As a result of him trying to unify the Congo, the United States engaged in an assassination, okay? What it would do is it would take the Congo away from Belgian colonialism and make it open to international colonialism. So if you had a picture in your head, think of the Congo as a bowl. There was one white hand in the bowl called the Belgians. Eclipsing the tenure of the Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba made that one white hand called Belgium take its hand out of the pot, and several white hands, known as the United States, France, on and on and on, put their hands in the bowl, okay? So it went from Belgian colonialism to international colonialism, okay? Where multiple European nations would have their hand in the Congo from that point on, really to this day. Okay, so Patrice Lumumba's story and his assassination is often spoken about as one of the most important assassinations of the 20th century. Right? So I'm going to stop there. Oh, okay, wait, let me go back. Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral, and I usually do this better, but Amilcar Cabral, Guinea-Bissau. You will see, I'm going to show a clip, and you should have observed this in the film. He is one of the few leaders of a West African nation where Europeans settled, okay? Europeans typically did not settle in West Africa. They say it's because of malaria, but I don't believe that, because any of you live in West Africa or travel West Africa, you know that there are European settlements all over West Africa, particularly in Senegal. Huge number of French retirees living there, you know, and it's a well-kept secret. That being said, Guinea-Bissau, although not physically occupied by the Portuguese, it was colonized by the Portuguese, and it would be one of the few, if not only, West African nation that would actually engage in armed struggle, notably armed struggle that included women, okay? That being said, Guinea-Bissau was ethnically diverse, just like every other part of the African continent. Amilcar Cabral, however, programmatically adopted a couple of things to deal with the diversity, ethnic diversity of that nation. He refused Cuban support in terms of military boots on the ground, meaning he refused to allow any Cuban who was contributing to their efforts to actually fight in the war. Fidel Castro would lend strategic support literally on the ground in person. However, no Cuban soldier was allowed to take up arms in the fight against the Portuguese on behalf of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. Why? Because of the ethnic diversity of Guinea-Bissau, Amilcar Cabral felt it was essential that these people, who for the first time would have to engage in an exercise to liberate themselves, be allowed to do so without the interruption of any other group of people, because this would be a bonding exercise, so to speak. He talks about it, and his position is that the struggle will prepare the people for the victory. See, they're ethnically diverse before they're colonized. They speak different language, have different cultures, and this would be the first time that they would have to engage in anything collectively for their total liberation that would benefit them all. And so what he's saying is that this was a process for the people of Guinea-Bissau to consummate their relationships, okay? I think people are very familiar with the fact that racism and racial animus is sometimes foreign to people on the African continent because of the simple fact ethnicity is such a dominant characteristic and identity for many people. Well, that was what these people were facing in the context of Guinea-Bissau. They're saying, I have ethnic identity, right? Fighting against this colonial power in the context of white supremacy and culture and imperialism is foreign to me. And so this process would be a consummation of their relationships and forge allow them to forge nationhood. It's a very important process, and it is also something we need to understand as we work together, because that's in essence what we seek to do. We still have differences, ethnic differences, cultural differences. We don't need to let religious differences stand in between us either, but we have national identities and differences. However, we have a common interest, right? We have a common interest. What racism does is it decreases the life chances of all African people, all Black people. Okay? That means in every area of life, whether you see it or not, it will touch you. Okay? Nationally, locally, community, family, individual. It will touch you on every level. That's why, you know, we have in the United States the same number of maternal mortality rate as women on the continent. A Black woman in a hospital in the United States can be in a bed right next to a white woman. However, in a place like New York City, where they have state-of-the-art healthcare, that Black woman during childbirth is 10 to 12 times more likely to die than the white woman sitting in the bed right next to her. Okay? That's what white supremacy and culture does, systemic white supremacy and culture does for you, right? And you can't get up and box it or anything. It is embedded and it's systemic and it's like shadow boxing. What we're trying to do, and as you know, I Love Black People did a healthcare global green book showing you services. What we are trying to do is essentially create our own systems in order to protect ourselves, right? Counter just that very thing, right? So most people who are not incensed by racism or white supremacy and culture don't understand how insidious it is and that it permeates every area of our lives. Nothing goes untouched, nothing. That's on the continent and that is out in the diaspora and the rest of the world, okay? So I've already spoken over much. Let me just go to the brief clips that I want you to, you know, get a little context from. Can I share my screen, Yvonne? Where's my share screen? Okay. All right, hold on 1 second, folks. Let me, I'm doing this on my device. All right, hold on. So I'm gonna share the screen and let me know if you all hear it, okay? Can you hear it?
July 1991 in Havana.
Yes.
It is Nelson
Yvonne?
Mandela's first trip outside Africa
good.
since his release from 27 years of prison. But why would the legend of struggle against oppression decide that the first person he wants to thank for helping to end apartheid is Fidel Castro, the very man who is regarded in the West as an oppressor of his own people? Fidel Castro and 500,000 Cubans took part in the African wars, which ultimately ended colonialism. This little-known story began in 1960, only a year after Cuban revolutionaries triumphed. Their struggle had captured people's imagination, and the young feisty leaders, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, emerged from 3 years of guerrilla war as heroes. The wave of independence in Africa was spreading like wildfire. That year alone, 17 African countries gained independence, and 30 others started their revolutionary armed struggle. African revolutionaries were looking to the Cubans as a model for their own independence. Cuba was living proof that David could beat Goliath.
La gran humanidad ha dicho basta y ha echado a andar, y su marcha de gigantes ya no se detendrá hasta conquistar la verdadera independencia. Quería referirme específicamente al doloroso caso del Congo, único en la historia del mundo moderno, que muestra cómo se puede burlar con la más absoluta impunidad, con el cinismo más insolente, el derecho de los pueblos.
Che Guevara was revolted, and his speech gave a clear signal that Cuba intended to act. The case of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo was symbolic of how African independence would be crushed by Cold War strategic interests. It was Lumumba's assassination that sparked a new era for many African revolutionaries, and with it started the epic of Cuba and Africa. The Congo, one of the largest and richest countries on the continent. The Belgian colony was demanding immediate independence. Patrice Lumumba, the young articulate clerk, led the movement that negotiated a peaceful solution to end Belgian rule. On June 30th, 1960, King Baudouin arrived in Leopoldville, the capital named after his great-uncle, to hand over power.
Le roi Baudouin était dans une voiture découverte. Il saluait la foule, etc. Un Congolais s'est précipité sur la voiture. J'ai vu les gardes du roi dégainer. Et tout le monde avait peur, se disait il va tuer le roi. Non, il a simplement sorti l'épée du roi de sa gaine. Et il s'est mis à danser avec cette épée. C'est très symbolique ça. C'est comme s'il lui a arraché le pouvoir.
On Independence Day, all the dignitaries assembled in Parliament. King Baudouin was to announce the transfer of power to the new government. Patrice Lumumba had just been elected Prime Minister. But the euphoria of independence did not last long. That same day, Lumumba lit a fire that spread through the entire continent.
L'indépendance du Congo constitue l'aboutissement de l'œuvre conçue par le génie du roi Léopold II.
Le discours du roi Baudouin, qui nous rappelait comment la Belgique nous a sortis de l'esclavage, comment ils ont lutté pour nous sortir des maladies du sommeil et patati patata. Ça a été un choc. Nous ne nous attendions pas à ce rappel malheureux parce que nous estimions que le roi Baudouin n'avait plus de leçons à nous faire ce jour-là.
À ce moment-là, Lumumba se lève, qui n'était pas programmé comme devant parler à ce moment-là. Il se lève et il parle. Il fait un discours très militant.
Combattants de l'indépendance, aujourd'hui victorieux, je vous salue au nom du gouvernement congolais. Nous avons connu les ironies, les insultes, les coups que nous devions subir matin, midi et soir, parce que nous étions des nègres.
Rappelez-vous comment on traitait le blanc par rapport au noir. Rappelez-vous dans les écoles quelle place nous occupions. Rappelez-vous tout l'apartheid. Alors évidemment, réaction immédiate de toute la délégation belge. D'abord, beaucoup d'agitation pendant que Lumumba parle.
Qui oubliera enfin les fusillades où périt tant de nos frères, ceux qui ne voulaient plus se soumettre au régime d'injustice, d'oppression et d'exploitation.
C'était mal reçu par les Belges, mais nous avons tout à fait répondu à nos aspirations.
Et au moment du dîner, on demande à Lumumba de présenter des excuses. Il ne s'en fait pas. Il présente les excuses en disant « Je pensais que je devais dire à cet homme des choses, je les ai dites, donc si ça a blessé, je m'en excuse et je demande qu'on tourne la page et que nous puissions voir les choses autrement. » Mais il était trop tard.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. Can you all hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to stop there. You can watch the rest of it, but essentially what happens is that, you know, Patrice Lumumba is betrayed by his right-hand person, the general of the army, Mobutu Sese Seko, and he is essentially assassinated. And from there, a puppet government under Mobutu is installed in the United States, and other foreign European nationals would now have access to the resources there. And it's a layered story because there's obviously more about to it. And you will see some of the people. Part of the reason why I'm stopping it here is because there's some conjecture in the context of this film, about him asking for support from the United States and, other things that are disparaging. You also will see the CIA agent who was involved in orchestrating an assassination and co-opting or essentially hiring Mobutu Sese Seko to assassinate Patrice Lumumba. I don't want to give too much conversation to that. You can watch it on your own if you haven't already. And then the other point I'm going to just go to really quickly is on a mill called Cabral and what I discussed regarding Guinea-Bissau and how we address ethnic difference and diversity, okay?
Gathering that included virtually every armed revolutionary movement from the 3 poorest continents. The Tricontinental Conference reinforced the island's role as the leader of internationalism. For Fidel, this was a good opportunity to assess the qualities of the revolutionaries he wanted to support. It was undoubtedly Amilcar Cabral who stole the limelight. Cabral, only 31 years old, was leading a fierce struggle against the Portuguese Empire in one of Africa's smallest and poorest nations, Guinea-Bissau.
Esta conferencia, aquí en Cuba, territorio libre de América, y primer país socialista en el hemisferio occidental, es en realidad una grande promesa, una grande esperanza para todos los pueblos que luchan contra el imperialismo.
Pero ya había un antecedente de América cuando se había entrevistado en el recorrido que hace el Che por distintos países, que llega a Conakry y tiene la oportunidad de hablar con América. Y el Che dice que uno de los movimientos de liberación más serios que hay en ese momento y de más posibilidad en ese momento es el movimiento de la liberación de la colonia de Guinea-Bissau y Cabo Verde.
Après les grands discours de Fidel Castro, Amilcar Cabral fait un discours remarquable. Il a caractérisé, je m'appelle ça, très bien la situation en Afrique à partir de son propre pays, en parlant des ethnies, en parlant d'états de pauvreté, d'exploitation, pour justifier l'idée de continuer l'alternance. Mais c'est parce qu'il n'y avait pas autre voie, parce que les grandes puissances s'opposaient à l'indépendance des colonies portugaises, par exemple.
For years, Amilcar's struggle was not of much consequence. But when the guerrillas started capturing territory, suddenly the importance of this neglected colony became evident. For Portugal, much more was at stake in Guinea-Bissau. This tiny colony could prove to be the empire's Achilles heel.
Y se liberaba Guinea-Bissau, y así se demostró después. Se desprendía la liberación del resto de los países de habla portuguesa que colonizados. Entonces, allí estaba el eslabón más flojo que tenían de la cadena, desde el punto de vista de los portugueses. No podían permitir, tuvieron hasta que hicieron todo el esfuerzo para no permitir que se dejara ninguna de las colonias, y mucho menos Guinea, que iba a ser el ejemplo del resto de las colonias para su liberación.
Guinée n'avait pas beaucoup de richesses. À ce moment-là, la Guinée devait recevoir de l'argent du Portugal. C'était un pays où on faisait l'agriculture, pas plus. une culture arriérée, on faisait la Guinée. Hein. Et tandis que ce n'était pas le cas en Angola où il y avait des immigrés qui étaient des commerçants, des hommes d'affaires. C'était des richesses de l'Angola et de Mozambique qu'ils voyaient, parce que Guinée n'ont rien fait.
The Portuguese were aware of their weakness, but they held a trump card. The government leased a strip of land on the Azores Islands to the US Defense Department. That airbase was used to protect American allies in the east, like Israel and Saudi Arabia. But the lease was renewable annually, so Portugal had every intention to use the Azores airbase as a bargaining chip.
Well, under the fascist regime of Portugal, Angola and Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau were part of Portugal. So the idea of giving up these colonies was unthinkable for that regime. So if we went to them and said, look, you must get out of Angola, we'll be very upset with you and all that, they might well have cut us out of the Azores. So NATO and the Cold War was far more important to us. There was a special law about not allowing U.S. arms given to Portugal to use them in Africa, but they did violate it, and we didn't do anything about it. In fact, we did not cut them off, even though we knew it, they were using them.
Nous n'avons pas même voulu nous mettre dans cette guerre-là entre l'Est et l'Ouest. Nous n'avons pas voulu, non. Mais malgré que beaucoup de gens disaient que ce sont des communistes, beaucoup de gens disaient ça, mais on n'avait pas de preuves. Comme disait Amilcar, nous étions des nationalistes africains, sans option idéologique.
Amilcar knew that it would be difficult to avoid labeling his movement, and having Cuban fighters would do little to dispel the belief that they were firmly allied to the Eastern Bloc. But he had a vision and a very clear strategy as to how to fight his battle for independence.
Es decir, que Amílcar no llega pidiendo, deme hombre, mándenme hombre, ¿no? Teníamos la idea de que habíamos sacado ya del Congo, de que venían a venir más tropas de cubanos a ayudar a Amílcar. Y en aquel momento Amílcar no quería más tropas de cubanos.
Son los guineanos que tienen que luchar. Y tú metes un batallón ahí, va a ser el batallón y no los canguros. Y tienen que aprender mediante la lucha, prepararse para la victoria. Es una idea muy, aunque fuera un poco más larga la lucha, era una idea muy interesante de ir forjando en medio de la lucha la nación. Hay que forjar una nueva nación, además tribus diferentes, solo la lucha por unirla.
Che's defeat in the Congo was still a fresh wound, and Fidel began to consider how his help could be more effective. This time, the bulk of Cuban support came in the form of artillery experts, doctors, and technicians. Soldiers would go only if requested.
They also took some lessons from their debacle in Congo. In Guinea-Bissau, the involvement was quite different. It was more of, in a good sense, technical nature of helping local forces of PAGC, the army, especially helping in those specialities when they hadn't got enough expertise, you see, to fight Portuguese. So it's more of, in the good sense, supportive role, you see.
Amilcar had no illusions about his capacity to defeat the mighty Portuguese Empire. He wanted to wear them down in order to get them to the negotiating table.
En la conversación que tiene Amílcar conmigo, en el frente, él me explica, se basaban en no atacar los cuarteles con intenciones de tomarlos, porque no había suficiente fuerza en condiciones en ese momento para eso. Yo quería era desangrar, hacerle bastante baja al enemigo y hacerle la vida imposible con ese tipo de combate. Hasta que se le haría la vida imposible en los cuarteles.
The war escalated, and the Portuguese sent 22,000 more soldiers. Amilcar's demoralization tactics had worked. The Portuguese...
Okay. So I'm going to stop there. So what they're saying is that the Portuguese would ultimately withdraw, but it wasn't an overt victory. It does lead to the independence of Guinea-Bissau from Portuguese colonialism, but it's not necessarily the kind of victory people think, in the sense that a straight out defeat of the Portuguese on the ground, right? It weakens them and forces them to withdraw. That being said, what the instructions are for us is to observe the strategies and the tactics that were used in light of the diversity of the people, okay, African people, and how we organize in spite of diversity, right? The last thing I want to say about the struggle in Guinea-Bissau in particular, as an example, as a model, is that it is one of the few notable liberation struggles where women and men engaged in armed struggle as armed militants, meaning it was a people's war. So women took up arms, and that is, a well-documented fact. I had a chance many years ago to meet one of the women who engaged in the armed struggle in Guinea-Bissau. So I'm going to leave it there. The things that I want you to, if you need to go back and watch it again with some of these things in mind, do so. Nkrumah leads this period in the late 50s with asserting that the independence of Ghana is nothing if it doesn't lead to the total independence and liberation of the African continent. We know that we're still on that march and on that journey, right? We don't have a unified Africa. We have a partially unified Africa, or some regions in Africa have some measure of unification, but not total unification. And we are still struggling against neo-colonialism. So next time we'll be talking about just that, neo-colonialism, some of the other Pan-Africanist leadership on the continent, and how to qualify things, okay, in light of this and more. So let me put my glasses on real quick, look at your questions. Okay, good, a lot of yeses. All right. Did you say Africa and its people are the causes of our own diversity? Please, can you throw more light? No, meaning, so Africa is the most diverse place on earth. More ethnicities, more languages, and now we have national identities. The diversity, literally the phenotype, the diversity of our phenotypes come from the African continent. Why? Because we're the first people on earth. We are the parent people, okay? So depending on what group and what direction that group went in, that is responsible for the peopling of the four corners of the world. Let me say it another way. There's not a human being on this earth that can say that unless they are something other than a Homo sapien, which is human, all human beings, the origin of humanity comes from Africa. So if your origins are not Africa, then we have to get into a conversation about what type of hominid you are. That was why I showed you the film, The Journey of Man, A Genetic Odyssey. I love it when people say that they're not African, right? Because my next question, to me, and understanding the science, to be human means to be African, first and foremost, okay? Now, it doesn't mean you're still culturally African, but the world's populations are a result of African people Black people migrating to the four corners of the world. And the differences between us in appearance have to do with our location in the world, the climate, environment, food, and the development of culture in those places. Another way to say it is this: all the world's, and I hate when people, especially in the Americas, always want to say, oh, you're not African, you're Native American. All the world's indigenous people are Black. Why? Because they're all migrated out of Africa. It's quite simple. All right. Humanity did not begin in the Americas. That's a proven fact. It's without dispute, you know? So what I'm saying is that the ethnicities that are represented in Africa are also they are the ancestors of the various groups of people on the planet, in the world, right? I hope I'm being clear. I don't know, you can tell me in the chat if I am. Okay, please, I don't see greetings, amazing dynamic brother, sister, thank you for okay, so that's the message from I Love Black People. The wars in Africa erased our ancient education system. War's worst thing is that it's destroying the learning we had achieved from being first academic. Absolutely, I would agree. I mean, it's not just the wars, it's the invasion of Africa by, you know, foreign forces that migrated out of Africa eons before that. Okay, so their reintegration into Africa has been problematic and disruptive. I'm interested to be active in Pan-African economy. So both K. Bill, you can write the administrator and ask how to join this course, the Pan-African History and Organizing course. And we're in the midst of a cycle, but you can join for the full next cycle, which is a 8-week cycle. Okay, so I think I've commented on everything that was here. All right, thank you all. Thank you everyone for lending your time, contributing your time, loving African people through action, not just with words. I'm gonna end there. So to support this film, I'm gonna send you a couple of documents that are related to Amilcar Cabral in particular, from the book called Return to the Source, okay? And then I'll be sharing the new readings for this week by Monday night. Someone else came in and, you know, asked me about, I don't see the readings. Monday night usually is when they go out, right? And that varies for where you are in terms of locale and the time frame, but Monday, Eastern Standard Time, the evening usually is when I put the new readings up. Sometimes I'm earlier than that, but usually by then they are up, okay? All right, folks, thank you so much. I am because we are. Stay safe.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Wright. I am because
Thank you.